Good evening and welcome. I'm Sheila Balgobin and I am the Dream Decipherer, and I help you to crack the code of your sleep and dreams so you can sleep sound and dream deep. This evening, I'm kicking off a three-part series which looks at trauma, its effect on the body, and its impact on sleep. So, in this first part, I'll be looking at trauma in general and its impact on us on the physical as well as emotional levels. But first, let me define trauma. Trauma can be defined as any experience that has lasting negative effects on an individual's well-being and ability to function. A single traumatic event can lead to psychological trauma, or it can build up over a period of time in response to ongoing stress. And while this definition of trauma has changed with time, it's clear that experiencing a potentially traumatic event is quite common. And in fact, research suggests that nearly 90% of people exposed to it will be exposed to at least one traumatic event during their lifetime. Now, as mentioned earlier, experiencing trauma can increase the risk of mental and physical health issues, including the threat of suicide. And if you or anyone you know has mentioned suicide or is thinking about it or has had brought things up that make you think that they're thinking about it, please, please, please contact a health professional, a doctor, a nurse, or other health professional immediately. And if you need on the spot care, contact an organization like the Samaritans, which can provide have counselors 24 hours a day that can help you get over the hump until you can get more substantial help. But let's look a little bit more closely at the impact of trauma on sleep. Now, after a traumatic experience, sleep issues are quite common. Excessive alertness and hyperarousal are related to the effects of the of st- of the a traumatic event is the body's stress response, and one of the stress responses can contribute to insomnia. Many people will have difficulty falling asleep and wake up more often during the night and have trouble falling back asleep after a traumatic event. And a traumatic event can be anything from watching an accident occur or being involved in one, a death of a loved one. So trauma can take different forms. Trauma can also impact what's called sleep architecture, which it means that it can change how the body moves through its sleep cycles and stages. And while experts are still working to understand the implications of these changes that occur in sleep architecture after a trauma, um, REM sleep or rapid eye movement sleep, when we're dreaming, appears to be the stage that is most affected by trauma. REM sleep is important for storing memories and also for processing emotions. And dreams during REM sleep tend to be more fantastic and bizarre and leaves you scratching your head the next day. But distressing dreams or nightmares are common when there has been a trauma. And survivors of trauma often have dreams about the traumatic event that either directly replay the experience or contain trauma related emotion, content, or symbols. And researchers theorize that trauma related dreams are caused by the brain's fear response combined with hyperarousal and may represent the mind's attempt to integrate this traumatic experience and process it. While sleep issues following a traumatic experience can be very distressing, They may also be an important opportunity for treating and healing the trauma. And there's research that suggests that being able to sleep following a traumatic event can prevent or reduce intrusive trauma related memories and make them less distressing. So, targeting sleep issues in the early treatment of trauma may actually reduce the risk of developing post traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. So, what are the different sleep disorders that may occur following a trauma? Insomnia is the most common and generally will resolve itself over time for most people who are trauma survivors. But more severe and persistent sleep disorders are seen in people with higher levels of post traumatic stress disorder. And while it's rare, sleep disorders that may develop after trauma include nightmare disorders, periodic leg movement disorder, or restless leg syndrome, sleep terrors where you wake up in a panic or see because when perceive nightmare figures in your room or what have you, and other issues such as REM sleep disorder, where your dream state is not firing properly. There also seems to be an important link between childhood trauma and long term health. And in a study that was conducted by the CDC and Kaiser, which had looked at the impact of childhood traumas, it found that in this study done with some 17,000 adults, that the risk of mental and physical problems later in life is increased, and which includes depression, anxiety, heart disease, and even early death when there has been childhood trauma. And one way in which childhood trauma increases the risk of disease later in life may be through the development and adverse effect of sleep problems. In this study that was done, up to one half of children showed signs of PTSD after a trauma, which including symptoms of hyperarousal and trouble sleeping. Trauma may have a significant impact on childhood brain development. So, sleep problems may persist or even get worse as the child grows older and goes through adolescence and go on into adulthood. If you look at the stats of people who had childhood trauma versus um, adults who have not had any or very few adverse experiences, the adults with a significant amount of childhood trauma are more than twice as likely to have trouble falling asleep and are also twice as likely not to feel rested even after getting a full night's sleep. Now, it seems that these adverse effects on sleep can last for up to 50 years. Can you imagine that? With each um, traumatic event experienced in childhood, increasing the risk of not getting enough sleep as an adult by some 20%. So, childhood trauma, though um, more and more attention is being given to it, is really, really critical in to have early intervention in order to not develop mental or physical problems later on in life. There was also found that trauma experienced during childhood can also affect the severity of insomnia as an adult. In adult patients diagnosed with insomnia, those with the highest number of adverse experiences or traumatic experiences woke up more often during the night and had more disturbed sleep than those with adults with few or no adverse experiences. So, what can be done? Is there anything to be done? Well, Well, it's normal for a traumatic experience to affect the quality and quantity of your sleep. There are things that you can do. First of all, is to be patient with yourself, and also to have a realistic expectation about getting yourself back into a regular sleep pattern. Now, it may to necessitate working with a doctor, a psychologist, or counselor of some kind that can help you to set up achievable goals, and to help you find ways to cope with sleep issues following a trauma. But here's some self-care tips that you can perhaps try. And the first and foremost is to maintain a normal sleep schedule. Routine is very important because it trains the brain to relax and to release stress. So having that regular pattern, regular routine already sets the brain up that, okay, it's time to relax and unwind and to ratchet things down in preparation for sleep. Safety is a big issue following a traumatic experience. So make sure where you're sleeping feels safe to you. And consider what changes, may even be small changes that you can make that will make your sleeping environment feel um, more nurturing and safe to you while you're recovering from the experience. It may involve having someone near you, or sleeping next to you, or on a couch, or in the next room, or having a phone near you, or keeping a light on in a dim light so that you don't feel quite so threatened. The other thing is, don't force yourself to sleep. It doesn't work. If anyone, thought business about counting sheep and all that, doesn't work. If you, after 20 minutes after an experience, you cannot go to sleep, get up and do something. Maybe read, a book, listen to some calming music, maybe have a glass of warm milk. I mean, it's just something to help you to relax and feel sleepy again, and then you can go back to bed. Because what that the stress of laying in bed thinking I need to go to sleep is going to push sleep further away, and you're going to be stressed, so you're raising your cortisol levels as well, which is not good for you. The final thing is just to understand that your symptoms are normal. There is no right or wrong way to process a traumatic experience, but processing it is essential. So and you might not be able to do it alone, particularly if it's a really strong, had a really strong impact on you and felt extremely stressful. If doctors, counselors, social workers, these are people that can help you to find ways to process this stress of the trauma, and therefore um, reduce the incidence of poor sleep or nightmares and what have you. So there's some things to think about how the sleep is impacted by trauma. In the second part of this series, I'll be looking at the role of trauma and the body's actual response to trauma. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Have a wonderful week to come, and I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye bye.